Dear friends, hello. Today I will tell you about 7 foods that really increase the risk of developing malignant tumors. I'd love to hear your interesting story. So, how did we as doctors learn about things like carcinogens and what kinds are there? This is a very interesting story, so make sure to watch until the end. You'll get a lot of enjoyment and fascinating information. Look, Sasha, nowadays any child you ask knows what a carcinogen is. In in school, I learned that carcinogens like those in French fries and smoking are harmful. It's common knowledge. But why? Because today this knowledge is accessible. Uh, there's a phrase I really like. I came up with it myself. Knowledge is valued by its absence in other people. Today, nobody values this knowledge. But in the past, there wasn't even an idea that carcinogens existed. For those who don't know what a carcinogen is, it's a substance that can cause you to develop a malignant tumor. There are different types of carcinogens based on their mechanism of action. Systemic local chemical carcinogens, ultraviolet light, for example, is a physical carcinogen, and radiation is also a physical type of carcinogen. There are many types, but when we talk about carcinogens, we always think of some substance that we consume with food, but food is just one way that carcinogens can enter the body. One of the trends, for example, that I often see now in America is a label on products. That means it's a type of pesticide that, when used, unfortunately ends up in the final product, like oatmeal. It's very harmful to our microbiome, for example. So, according to tests, it seems to be safe for humans, but it destroys our microflora, and that's not very good. And microflora is our immunity and everything else. And that's why now on products, for example, in fact, there are a huge number of products that contain carcinogens, but in permissible amounts. But you don't know how much carcinogen, and you don't know you consume if you add up all the products together. So there's a very interesting story about where carcinogens came from. A few centuries ago, chimneys were cleaned by little children. Little children. Why little ones? Because their shoulders had to be narrow, and during the Industrial Revolution, these chimneys were narrow. There were many of them in houses, they were connected, and to clean them, since they were winding, these were not typical chimneys. Child labor was involved. The children involved were mainly under the age of 8, as older children would be too large. How did they work? The child was tied to a rope and he would crawl into the chimney, go in and clean it. And there was a huge amount of child mortality, including cases where some were buried by soot. And children, together with their, let's say, mentors, would walk the streets, and in a day they could serve 10 to 15 corpses. Naturally, they didn't wash. Naturally, they walked barefoot, and there was a huge amount of soot on them. It was noticed that adults started to develop a disease called malignant wart. An unhealing ulcer would appear on the scrotum, which would start to grow inward and reach the scrotum. And these people started to develop a large number of lymph nodes in the groin area and abdomen. They died essentially from cancer. People started to wonder where all this was coming from and why. A certain class of people, meaning it was always people from the lower class who worked as something in their childhood.
Chimney sweeps, yes.
They worked in their childhood. And this evil wart developed in them, it turns out, after 10, 15, 20 years. They explored the cause and effect relationship between childhood injuries and their current condition, pondering the potential causes. And they noticed that it was specifically those who had contact, especially with the scrotum. Yes, it's very sensitive. Warts would appear from the soot, and they started doing experiments. They took soot extract, injected it into mice, and the mice developed malignant tumors which caused them to die. Then they proved the connection, and it was discovered. Thus, they said that there are carcinogens in nature, substances that, when they come into direct contact or enter our food, that is, enter our body, or through external exposure. As mentioned, there are chemical and physical carcinogens that cause new growths. Carcinogens emerged. You know what's funny? It took them years to prove the cause and effect relationship and the presence of a carcinogen, even after they had the evidence. After that, they banned child labor and using children as chimney sweeps. 200, you guessed it. 200 years later.
How many?
200, you guessed it.
Are you out of your mind?
I think it will be the same with smoking and with all other things. We objectively understand a lot of food additives, a lot of things that we use today, but in reality, there are things that shouldn't be used. And you see that today, for example, vapes and a huge number of electronic cigarettes have appeared, and in the case of soot, 20 years later, there was no contact after people had quit. They hadn't worked as chimney sweeps for 20 years already, but the effects on their health started to appear after 20 years. And so after 20 years, this understanding came. So when people say that things like vapes, IQOS, and e-cigarettes are safe, how can you really know that?
You smoked!
5 or 10 years, what will happen in 20 or 30 years? We don't have such a history yet, and there's no statistics to say that it's safe, but as long as it brings in money, it's promoted as a safe method. Our kids walk around smoking. Think about the carcinogens they are exposed to. Let's classify them. Carcinogens can have a local effect. What does local effect mean? It means contact with the area of the body where it was. That's where skin cancer will develop. These are chimney pipes. In fact, children had contact with the scrotum, and this is just a simple example for you. The second is organotropic, which means that a specific carcinogen causes a specific type of cancer. It's not just that smoking causes cancer somewhere unclear, because smoking can cause kidney cancer, bladder cancer, and lung cancer. For example, a malignant tumor of the pleura in all workers who come into contact with asbestos. Well, if it develops, it's very often a pleural tumor. And there are multiple effects that affect several organs. Well, smoking. The most common type of carcinogen is tobacco tar, some industrial and household substances, and some, for example, dyes. Painters are prone to various cancers, including renal, pelvis, ureter, bladder, urethra, and kidney cancer. The risk increases due to contact with urine, which contains excreted substances that come into contact with mucous membranes. Carcinogens are also classified by origin as chemical carcinogens. For instance, when you consume a beverage containing a carcinogen, the chemical carcinogen enters your body. There are also local acting carcinogens, physical carcinogens like ultraviolet. That's why they say, please use protective measures to protect yourself from ultraviolet. The risk of certain cancers, such as breast or skin cancer, increases. This is melanoma. In terms of how it causes mutations, it can be genotoxic and epigenetic, and also in terms of its molecular structure. But let's not delve into specifics, as it depends on the substance's composition. Carcinogens themselves are divided into different groups. There are group 1 carcinogens, which means they definitely cause cancer. This has been proven. There are group 2 carcinogens, which means they are highly likely to cause cancer. They can cause it. There are group 3 carcinogens. So each carcinogen is different, but we tend to lump them all together, even though all carcinogens are different. So we've discussed what a carcinogen is, what carcinogen C is, and what actually happens in the body. You prefer specifics, so let's get specific. Darish, the effect is cumulative. For instance, with Sagido, contact led to development over time. It can be attributed to certain products, of course, but whatever product I list right now, it won't cause cancer, just because you ate here once. It's about a lifestyle where these products are present in large quantities and regularly, including due to accumulation. So the more products from this list, the better. So, for example, if you overuse but only consume one product from the list, that's one situation. Imagine your entire diet consisting of all these products. Of course, the overall effect will be multiplied. So the first one is processed meat. What is processed meat? Processed meat is sausages, frankfurters, ham, in other words, things that didn't used to run around on the street. And this is a product of our modern, let's say, changed perception of healthy food. Many people believe that sausages are healthy, but they are not healthy at all.
Not even once.
This is number 1 on my list of carcinogens. You can forget about a healthy lifestyle if you constantly eat only sausages, although many people genuinely believe that a sausage is just ground meat. Yeah, friends, that's not the case at all.
I'm naive, I'm trusting, it's easy to fool me.
According to the World Health Organization, this type of food is classified as a group 1 carcinogen, and it's linked to colorectal cancer and stomach cancer. They can be replaced with fish, white meat, and seafood. That means it's best to minimize this product in your diet or replace it with something healthier. Second, red meat. Red meat is a group 2A carcinogen, which means there isn't a direct link like with processed meat, but it's still a group 2A carcinogen. This means that it all depends on the amount. To avoid becoming part of the cancer statistics, you should limit yourself to 100 grams. But I think that's assuming that you still eat or drink something else somewhere if you basically lead a healthy lifestyle and eat properly. I think the dose of red meat, this isn't telling you meat lover, I'm trying to clear the name of red meat. Alcohol. We're all used to thinking that alcohol is something safe, and when we talk about the harm of alcohol, we always try to sugarcoat it, talking about the benefits of red dry wine. Alcohol is classified as a group 1 carcinogen, which means it can directly increase the risk of developing cancer. This includes the mouth, tongue, esophagus, and stomach. Therefore, in addition to being locally toxic on its own and having a damaging effect, alcohol also disrupts your microbiome, lowers your immunity, and indirectly increases the risk of developing diseases. Now, this might be a shock for many people. It's a group 1 carcinogen. I'm surprised about salted fish. Salted fish, and not just salted actually. Smoking food is generally considered unhealthy due to the high levels of smoke. Despite enjoying the smoky aroma, there are no actual health benefits associated with it. These are combustion products basically that soak into the food. This method actually came from China. Carcinogenic substances form during the salting process. If you don't believe me, you can read this information on the internet. There are studies that prove it. And that's why, just like processed meat, we classify this as a group 1 carcinogen. I also consider sweet carbonated drinks to be carcinogens. Which ones exactly? Sugar, refined sugars in large amounts, there's nothing beneficial for our microbiota. Because, many fitness trainers say, well, what's the big deal about drinking Coca-Cola? It's just sugar. What difference does it make where the sugar comes from? Yes, but as my friend says, it's like jet fuel for your bad microbiota because it's the bad microbiota that feeds on it really well. And besides the effect that you only consider and evaluate in the bloodstream, you also need to assess the effect of its local impact on the gastrointestinal tract, and that impact is extremely negative. So please either remove sweet drinks from your diet or minimize them as much as possible. A simple conclusion probably is fast food, all fast food. If you eat fast food, most likely, with a high degree of probability, you are not controlling the substances that enter your body or those that don't. That's why we should limit fast food in our diet. And the last thing is over-fried food. We all love kebabs, especially with a crispy crust, but there's nothing good in it. And of course, the crust seems to be the tastiest part sometimes. I really love over-fried meat too. But there's nothing good in it, because heterocyclic amines are what get into our food when we cook it like that. And by the way, there was an interesting study where they took white meat, added creatine to it, and fried it. And the highest percentage of carcinogenic substances was exactly at the point of contact with the metal. So should you marinate it beforehand? Yes.
That's why.
Actually, any product, we often talk about healthy foods, and any healthy product can be spoiled and turned into a carcinogen. Fried broccoli seems like broccoli, seems healthy, but come on, it's all fried in oil in a deep fryer. It's basically like meat. It can be quite healthy if you cook it properly. And besides the carcinogens you get from improper cooking, you should also remember that all this heat treatment destroys all the good stuff in the meat. Not just the protein, but also things like vitamin B12 and creatine. That's why when I order meat, I always ask for it rare. It's called with blood, but it's not actually blood. I always ask for it like that. I don't like it overcooked, and I don't like it when my meat has a thick crust. But in my life, just like in yours, sometimes I do have meat with a crust and all that other stuff. It's crucial to stay grounded, steer clear of extremism, and approach things rationally. Sometimes unhealthy food is acceptable in your diet. What matters most is the overall picture of your eating habits. If you visit the country house every few weeks, you should discuss it. Otherwise, the carcinogen will appear silly.
But go ahead and eat.
These kebabs, no, they're not very healthy, but just try to make sure that most of the time your diet is proper. It should have enough healthy foods, including antioxidants, which will balance your system and help you greatly reduce the risks of many environmental diseases. I work a lot in the field of preventing cancer, because at work I already treat cancer when it has already happened. And through these videos, through promoting a healthy lifestyle, through vitamins and Ipsum, which I produce, I try to help people get rid of these risks that unfortunately arise when we live in a big city. Among antioxidants, for example, that's why I always recommend from the latest products I've released, resveratrol and astaxanthin. In general, you can check out the product line, take a look. But remember, no vitamins will save your body and soul if you lead an unhealthy lifestyle. Supplements only aid and complement a healthy diet and routine. Without this foundation, buying or taking supplements is pointless. Don't waste your money.